Thanks, Clint. Well, overseas flights are set to become cheaper as Qantas announces a boost to international routes with nearly 1 million extra seats available from October. But some Aussie pilots are furious as the airline has decided to outsource international crews and aircraft for some of those flights. To discuss, we are joined by former Qantas pilot Richard de Crespigny. Richard, so good to see you.
Great.
First off, where will these extra flights go?
Well, there's lots of flights announced out of Brisbane, New York, Tokyo, Los Angeles. It's a whole suite, but there are extra flights being wet leased, which means the aircraft and the Finnish crews are being used to fly Qantas services. That'll be from Sydney to Singapore and Bangkok.
It's hardly the spirit of Australia, though. Is there a concern there, do you think, or not?
It's not the spirit. Everyone likes the feeling of g'day, mate, when you get on wherever you are in the world. The g'day, mate, puts you back into Australia. They love that. There's the culture of the Australians that make a unique atmosphere in Qantas aircraft, and that will be lost in those wet-leased aircraft, unfortunately.
Alan Joyce says this is going to put downward pressure on fares. What do you reckon? Are we actually going to see cheaper flights?
Oh, I think, well, flights have to get cheaper. They've been at astronomical highs for the last 2 years. So this extra capacity will increase. Qantas has been purchasing aircraft and replacing them at a very low rate. So we're short of aircraft, we're very short of crew. And so they've been operating on skeleton crews in operational areas for a long time. They're growing as quickly as they can, but these are the pressures that they have.
Some Aussie pilots have expressed disappointment with Qantas because it'll be using Finnair pilots, crew and aircraft for some flights. As I mentioned before, not really in the spirit of Australia. What do you make of that decision?
Oh, I totally understand that. I mean, Qantas was formed by 2 pilots and 1 financier over 100 years ago. And for the last 40 years, there really hasn't been a pilot on the board. The pilots are responsible for the safety of the passengers and the aircraft. We take it seriously and we'd like to be involved in negotiations or decisions. I think the union wasn't advised until about 2 nights ago of the decision, so they feel a bit left out. I think everyone's working hard and the decision is probably the right decision to make, but it's unfortunate that Qantas couldn't have been keeping the pilots after COVID and recruiting them earlier so that to avoid this.
Well, you just touched on it then, but Qantas let a lot of pilots go during the pandemic. What are you hearing? Have those pilots ended up going back in the industry, or have they just, hung up their wings and gone into a different area?
A lot of airlines have lost a lot of pilots. Cathay lost 1,600 pilots, have only replaced 400 of them. Qantas lost a lot. A lot of pilots and cabin crew went to other industries. One pilot, Tom Kasker, started his own drone company in Australia and is very successful. So these pilots didn't want to take on the stress. It wasn't worth it, so they've stayed away. So, yes, I think they haven't got all the pilots back, which is part of the problem. You have to look after your staff. The staff will look after the passengers and the passengers will look after the shareholders. So they need to keep Qantas needs to keep the staff close. They need to consult more, I think, and then the airline will progress forward in a united fashion.
You mentioned stress and pressure. Do you think the job's changed a lot since you were flying?
Oh, absolutely. The industry has been growing 15% since the 1980s, and the airports haven't increased at that rate. So everyone's under increased pressure with interruptions, distractions, and it's a harder job. It's a much more stressful job, and the responsibility is getting higher as the automation increases. The pilots do a remarkable job.
Oh, they do.
And I'd like to see more pilots on the board of airlines like Qantas. But they do a great job, and that's why Qantas is such an amazing company. And, things change, things happen.
Yeah, we need to support them and continue flying,
Absolutely, right? Support them, absolutely.
Good on you, Richard. Always lovely chatting with you.
Thanks, Sophie.
Hey there, Today fans. Sarah and...
What's my name again?
Oh my God, Carl.
Hey, thanks for watching our YouTube channel, though. Subscribe now for more news, special reports and amazing Aussie stories.
And Carl misbehaving,
Whoa,
of course.
that never happens.
Always happens.
What's she talking about?